Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 136 of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Tonight, we start Season 4 with the live episode we recorded in Birmingham at Tolkien 2019.
And we'll step into that live common room here in just a moment. But first, I'm Shawn Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, who survived a Brian Sibley clothing put-down, Alan Sisto.
Do not remind me. Man, when we get him on the show... And we will, folks. We're going to have words about that, I'm sure. But anyway, folks, you'll get that inside joke in about 2 hours. Memories. You'll get that joke in about 2 hours, folks. But in the meantime, the live episode you're about to hear has its own introduction, so we're going to keep this one short.
Yeah, really, we just wanted to pop on to let you know that because it's a live episode, it doesn't quite meet our usual audio quality expectations, but it is a lot of fun. First up, you're going to hear us talk with John Garth again. And with Richard Medrington of the one-man show Leaf By Niggle.
And then we have a chat with Ted Nasmith in the lobby of the hotel where Tolkien 2019 was held. So don't be surprised if you hear Tolkien Society Chair Shawn Gunner's mighty guffaw somewhere in the background.
You'll know it when you hear it, folks.
Yes, you will.
And then finally, you're going to hear our second live session of the event with Brian Sibley, Bill Fliss, and Dimitra Fimi.
So folks, sit back and enjoy this special live episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to this taping of the Prancing Pony Podcast.
You can clap. Thank you.
Cue applause.
This podcast began when Shawn and Alan met in the comment section of a Facebook group and decided to take it to a private space and see what it would be like if they did all their fun hijinks on air.
The first of several inappropriate comments, is that what that is?
We should put that on our website.
No, we should not.
The format of the podcast is fairly simple. They read from the works of Tolkien and then talk about them. What sets this podcast apart from others is the wide range of experts and commentary they bring in, and also the joy with which they approach the material. So with no further ado, let us turn the stage over to Alan Sisto, the man of the West, and the real-life Lord of the Mark, Shawn Marchese.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Little Masters, or I guess I should say good afternoon, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 136 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where Shawn and I have journeyed a long way from Bree to be coming to you live from Tolkien 2019 in Birmingham.
Yeah, to paraphrase Mary Brandybuck, we have come a long way and been through some stiff times. And I'm just talking about Tuesday night's pub mooch. But folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in our traveling common room, as I see most of you have already done. I'm Shawn Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here, as always, with the man of the West, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Shawn. And folks, at the risk of repeating myself, we are coming to you today from the McDonald Burlington Hotel in Birmingham, where we are attending Tolkien 2019, the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Tolkien Society.
Hundreds of fans, scholars, artists, and so forth have come here from all over the world.
Plenty of so forth.
Lots of so forth, like us. And we're truly honored to be a part of it, really over the moon, I think, at being here today. Now, for those of you who are here in the room, I'm going to assume that maybe not all of you have heard our podcast before. In fact, do we want to do a little?
Yeah, let's show of hands. How many here have listened to the show? Okay, it's a lot more than at our usual events.
So that
makes sense, because if you've not listened to our show before, you're listening to Bill Fliss.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, so most of you may know this already, but we'll take a few minutes today to talk a little bit about who we are and how we got here, and then we're going to spend some time talking to some of the special guests here at Tolkien 2019.
Absolutely. And if we can manage to keep a few minutes free at the end, we're going to open it up for questions and answers. We'd love to take some questions from you. But before we dive in, we want to thank a whole lot of folks for making this possible. I want to thank Carl Southern, Mike Percival, Andy Armstrong, and Matthew Davison, who have helped coordinate everything we've needed to pull off this live episode. These are challenging, technically speaking. So, and
Thank you
thanks
all so
to
much.
Shawn Gunner, who him and his amazing team, and I mean amazing team, have pulled this incredible event off, and we just are grateful for everybody at the Tolkien Society and who invited us, frankly.
Yeah.
So,
And I'd also like to add a really huge thank you to the guests who are willing to share their time with us today. John Garth, Richard Medrington, and Ted Nasmith.
Mm-hmm. And thanks also to the members of the Fellowship of the Podcast. Now, that's our Patreon family, and a number of you probably belong to that. They've helped support the show and enabled us to be here, and along with everybody who bought one of the special Tolkien 2019 fundraising t-shirts, a number of which I see here today.
I see quite a few in here. Thank you all for wearing them.
It's heartwarming.
And finally, really, just thank you to all of our listeners. Those of you who are here in the room with us right now, some of you who have traveled quite a long way to be here, thank you so much. Thank you to those folks listening to this podcast on our feed in the future. And really, just all of you. You're the ones who've made this show what it is, and we would not be here without you. So thank you.
That is true. Now, we want to get to our guests quickly, so we'll try to make this quick, but we want to take a couple of minutes just to kind of recap a little bit of the history of the show. The Prancing Pony Podcast was sort of a happy accident, really. Near the end of the year, 2015, I'd been doing some voiceover work, not for very long, and one of my VO coaches suggested starting a podcast to help me get a little more comfortable behind a mic. The idea was, look, nobody's going to listen. You'll just do it 3 or 4 times, and then it'll stop. But it'll help you, with mic technique. Okay, great. Sounds like a good idea. Didn't really know what I wanted to talk about. Wasn't going to talk about sports, politics, technology, any of the other things that maybe I'm interested in. I decided the only thing I'd really want to talk about at length was the works of Professor Tolkien. But it didn't take me more than about, 30 seconds to figure out that the last thing I wanted to do was a solo show. I needed a co-host.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I come in.
Yeah, I think so.
Because Alan and I had met...
That's what the script says.
As far as I know, that's where I entered. We had met as members of a Facebook group, as Julie mentioned a moment ago, Facebook group for Tolkien fans. And there was a series of discussions in that group called Book Week posts. And the idea was that you'd write about a favorite passage in one of the books and just invite people to talk about it with you. You'd say something you like, it was a little commenting back and forth, and it was a really good discussion.
A paragraph or two was the idea.
A paragraph or two was the idea about something you liked.
Tell where this is going.
Yeah. And so Alan and I were both among the few in that group that would actually participate. There was about a dozen or so out of thousands of people in the group.
Right.
And we gradually started writing longer and longer essays on Facebook. And if you've ever written or read a 2,000-word essay on Facebook, it's a lot of fun. And you can't format it or anything like that. So I like to write with a lot of italics and things like that, and you just can't do it. So we were doing these sort of progressively longer, and I think it almost became a little bit of a competition. Didn't it?
Yeah.
Like who could do the longest one, and
pulling out the most obscure references.
Yeah. And somehow through our conversations in that group, Alan got the idea that I would be qualified to co-host a podcast.
I actually did. I thought maybe.
Yeah. I think
I'm still mostly convinced that he is.
Mostly. I think I've mostly gotten you there. I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and I think I'd said that it sounded like a fun thing to do. So January 2016, I got this email from Alan saying, hey, would you like to co-host a Tolkien podcast with me? And he said something like, it would be maybe 30 to 60 minutes once every 2 weeks or once a month. So if most of you have listened to the show, you know that our weekly 90-minute show makes that look adorable now.
It really does. So we spent the next few weeks going back and forth on ideas and possible segments and things like that, titles. I think if we knew then what we knew now, we probably would have called it the Bombadilicious broadcast.
It's probably a good thing we didn't
probably
know.
not,
What we know now. It's still better than my original idea, which was all rings considered.
Oh, that was awful. Awful. Our typical podcast format, of course, is roughly a 90, 100-minute show in which we work our way through Tolkien's Legendarium. We do it a few pages at a time. We read selected passages. We do our best dramatic dialogue interpretation. We talk about the story. And we comb through scholarly works on Tolkien to identify important themes, recurring images, linguistics, mythology, generally to give our listeners as much information and insight into the text as we can.
And every once in a while, we take a break from that format to welcome a guest to the show. Scholars who've done important academic work on Tolkien, including several people who are at this conference, artists and other individuals who we think our audience would want to hear from. And along the way, we make very silly jokes and pop culture references as often as we can.
Yeah, and we digress a lot, as anybody who listens to the show knows. And we're in danger of doing that now, so we're going to go ahead and get things rolling. This episode is going to be the beginning of Season 4. Following this, we're going to be working our way through Book 2 of The Lord of the Rings. And by Book 2, we mean...
second half of Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah,
That's
so
correct.
We've got a long way to go before we're done with The Lord of the Rings. That means if you haven't listened to us before, you've got plenty of time to catch up. We're going to be here a while.
Yeah, it's a good long run. So we only have a limited time, though, today, so we want to go ahead and get started. Let's get on with the show.
Yes, so our first guest today is an award-winning writer, biographer, and speaker on J.R.R. Tolkien.
His books Tolkien and the Great War and Tolkien at Exeter College have been rightly hailed as the definitive accounts of Tolkien's early life.
He's contributed critical and scholarly essays to numerous publications in print and online, while also teaching and acting as a consultant on Tolkien in World War I, and we do not know when he sleeps.
Apparently not. He's making his third appearance on the Prancing Pony Podcast, which might call for professional intervention, making him the current record holder. We'd like to welcome back John Garth.
Thank you very much indeed. In fact, I barely slept last night at all because I was finishing the talk that I'm about to deliver.
Not because you were nervous about being on our show?
I forgot about that, actually.
That's fair.
Well played, sir.
That's fair. Well, John, we know you're always working, and that excites us because we love your work, and we always want more of it. And we do want to hear a little bit more about what you've been up to since the last time we saw you. But first, let's talk a little bit about this event, Tolkien 2019. What have you done so far? We're about a day and a half in right now. What have you enjoyed?
Apart from finishing writing my paper, the thing that I really had to take time out for was to watch the Leaf By Niggle performance, which was just marvellous. Of course, I know the text, but hearing something in a different medium and hearing it well done, brilliantly done in a different medium, really wakes you up to new things. So I was sitting there just wanting to scribble down notes all the time and thinking, I've got to go off and write this. I've got to write this, you know. So it was great for exploding new ideas.
Yeah,
that's great.
Well, earlier this year we had the release of Dominic film Tolkien, which focused on Tolkien's early life, which is your area of expertise. What has the release of the film meant for you? Has there been a renewed interest in this period of Tolkien's life?
Yes, definitely. It was pretty strong anyway, certainly in Britain, because of the focus on the First World War during the centenary years. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I have access to my Amazon sales rank figures. You don't see how many books you're selling, but you see the graph, and it's definitely improved.
Good,
that's great. I'm glad.
So that's really good. Thank you, Dome Karakowski. Yeah.
Or you might thank Stephen Colbert, who handed Dominic Karakowski a copy of Tolkien and the Great War at the panel.
Was it the other way around?
Oh, it
was the other way around.
Karakowski gave Colbert a copy of the book.
See, that's why I have Shawn here.
And I thought for sure Colbert's already read that. But
I know, I'm sure he has.
I'm still waiting for a call from Stephen Colbert.
So are we. So are we, yeah. Do we want to talk a little bit about the film, maybe? We've got a little bit of time. Yeah. What were your thoughts? I mean, I know it's a general open-ended question, but specifically, I guess let's focus on the TCBS. That's really, I think, where your expertise is, and that was a big element of the film. What were your thoughts on the characterizations of the three other, well, even all four of them?
Well, just first of all, I mean, I've got to say it's a lovely-looking film, and it's got, in its own way, a sensitive, intelligent script. And I've seen that there are, genuine, knowledgeable Tolkien fans who really like the film. I've got a problem with it because I'm a historian and biographer, and my aim has always been to try to excavate the true story and present it in the most truthful way and enlightening way possible. And of course, you don't expect a biopic to stick 100% to the facts, but you expect it to stick perhaps more than 5% to the facts.
That would be nice.
There's that Tolkien quote about the canons of narrative art, and you expect there to be some changes, right? But,
sure. So in terms of the characterization of the TCBS, and there's a fine example in that, these characters as portrayed in the film, they're interesting figures, but I don't recognize them. I got to know TCBS members quite well through reading their letters, which was a tremendous privilege to do personally. I've read them all. I've read them in detail. And of course, I've published quite a bit from them in Tolkien and the Great War. And I don't recognise, in particular, R.Q. Gilson. It looks to me as though G.B. Smith has stolen some of his personality, his sensitivity, his artistic passion, and so on. I don't recognise G.B. Smith, who in reality was really a sharp, acerbic, impatient man. And he's been turned into this, artistic aesthete kind of chap, So there we are, yeah.
So obviously your work on Tolkien's early life has brought you very close to his early writings, particularly the early versions of Three Great Tales, right? The Fall of Gondolin, Beren and Luthien, or The Tale of Tuduviel, and Children of Húrin, also the Book of Lost Tales. And I heard you say this morning, those were all written during or shortly after the war years. But aside from maybe people at this conference, a lot of mainstream readers don't really know that much about those works. Most people are more interested in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. What do you feel, if anything, maybe the mainstream perception of Tolkien is lacking if they don't know those early works?
They don't know the depth, or the breadth and the depth if Christopher Tolkien had not edited and published the Silmarillion and produced all the editions he's since produced, The History of Middle-earth, Unfinished Tales, and so on, I think the understanding of Tolkien would have been paused at a certain level and unable to get as high as it can now go. Because the whole thing is so interwoven, isn't it? It's this astonishing life work that amounts to a kind of tapestry. And with just those things published in his lifetime, you don't see the whole tapestry.
You said it was that tapestry. You said it was the history of Middle-earth that really sort of set you off on your journey.
Absolutely, yeah. So I've told you this story before, I think, but in a nutshell, when the history of Middle-earth sequence was finally completed, 1996, I wanted to devise a grand dictionary of Elvish, which would track the changes in Tolkien's invented languages through his lifetime, because they didn't stand still. He kept tinkering with them. Right. And that meant looking really closely at when he wrote all the texts in which these words appeared. And that diverted me completely onto studying the chronology of Tolkien's writing and looking at it really closely and looking at it in context. Starting at the beginning. So just starting at the beginning, 1914 to 1918, it's the First World War, and that in itself produced my first book.
Yeah. Do you feel like the recent publications of the three great tales, I guess Children of Hurin's been about 12 years now, but the other two more recently, do you think that's changed the public perception at all? Has that raised awareness, or is it almost seems like that's still mostly of interest to people who are already Tolkien fans?
Yeah.
But
I would assume that it has reached more Tolkien fans than Unfinished Tales and the History of Middle-earth, where this material has largely been published previously. Yeah. There's no question that reading the History of Middle-earth is hard work. It takes a lot of dedication to get everything out of it. Yeah. Producing these editions that are beautifully illustrated by Alan Lee, that cut out the footnotes, the endnotes, most of the commentary, just gives a real flavour, and allows you to follow streamlined threads through this vast tapestry.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, we want to move on, at least briefly before you leave, to your current projects. Our listeners are always excited when you've got something new coming out, and you've got a new book due out in 2020. It's called Tolkien's Worlds, The Places That Inspired the Writer's Imagination. Can you tell us anything about that? And again, only what you're comfortable talking about, since we don't want to spoil the contents for anybody.
Well, the talk that I'm giving this afternoon focuses on one discovery that goes into that book, and I've been able to unpack it today in today's talk much more than I can in the book, which is all about one of the inspirations for one of Tolkien's famous towers in The Lord of the Rings. So I discovered a whole chain of inspirations behind it, and going back to the beginning, there's a local news item from the time when he was just before he started The Lord of the Rings that I believe had a major effect on his writing. So that's one aspect. In a similar way, when Tolkien was writing about the Barrow Downs, there were events going on in British archaeology that were very pertinent to the atmosphere he conjures of these ancient petty wars and the imprint they leave on the ancient landscape. So that's the kind of thing. The book is really an attempt to raise the level of discussion of Tolkien's inspiration by place, and to bring in my other expertise about chronology and so on when he wrote certain things.
And do you have a publication date? Do you know when that's going to be released?
It should be out in Britain from a publisher called White Lion, an imprint of Quarto Books, in February, and in the US from Princeton University Press in March.
Excellent. Well, we'll have to have you back on the show sometime in February or March, I'm guessing.
Will do.
Well, for now, though, we'll let you go. We know you've got a lot of plans, and you got your paper or your talk coming up. So,
all right, yeah.
Thank you, John, so much. Really appreciate you joining us today. Well, folks, our next guest is, he's a puppeteer, a performance poet, and he's a novelist who's also the founder of Puppet State Theater Company.
He's responsible for the one-man show adaptation of Tolkien's Leaf By Niggle, which he performed for us here in Birmingham last night at Tolkien 2019.
A show which disappointingly did not feature puppets, but nonetheless, it was a masterful show. It was powerfully moving.
It was incredibly moving and just really fantastic. We can't say enough about how much
it changed our plans. That's why he's here.
But he's also the author of a fantasy novel entitled Sea Above, Sky Below, which I was able to pick up a copy of last night, and I'm looking forward to reading it. So, folks, please welcome to the Prancing Pony Podcast, Richard Medrington.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, since this is your first time and not your third time on the Prancing Pony Podcast, we have to ask you the question that we ask everybody who comes on the show. When and how did you first discover Tolkien's work? And for our listeners, most of them are in the States, and of course they weren't able to attend last night. Tell us when and how you first decided to turn an admittedly lesser-known work by Tolkien into a one-man show.
Well, I discovered Tolkien by reading The Lord of the Rings to my sons when they were quite small. It was a bedtime story. Night after night, we just read through the whole thing. Leaf By Niggle I came across in Tree and Leaf with Tolkien's essay on fairy stories, just tucked away at the back. I can't even remember how I stumbled through the essay and into the story, but when I'd finished reading it, I thought, this is it. I have to do something with this story.
Yeah.
And as I said last night, I wanted to turn it into a puppet show. Talked to the Tolkien Trust. They were nice. They actually gave me permission to do it once as a storytelling piece at a conference, but they didn't really go for the puppetry idea. So I put it aside for quite a long time. And then when I was working on my novel, which I failed to finish, put aside until I was persuaded by friends to go on, you should try and finish. Because I would say to people, I've got this, I started writing a novel and I couldn't finish it. They said, well, why don't you try again? I said, no, I can't, it's under the bed, I'm not going to finish it. Go on, try. So I did. Brought it out, and then I thought, of course, Leaf By Niggle. That's about the man who couldn't finish his work of art.
Right,
exactly.
Because he kept on putting extra bits onto it. Didn't have the boundaries. Didn't put a frame on it. And he was never going to finish it. I thought I mustn't be that person. So I read the story again, and as I was reworking on my novel, and I thought, hey, this story is even more relevant now, and why don't more people know this story? So I talked to the Trust again, and I had more of a track record then. We'd done quite a successful show called The Man Who Planted Trees, and a member of the Trust came to see us do that in London.
Oh, wow.
And we sent a DVD of it to Christopher Tolkien. He said he didn't, because I do it with an American puppeteer called Rick Conti, who operates a dog puppet, which is, everybody loves the dog.
Never work with kids or animals.
No, well, right. Well, in this case, I have to work with this dog. It's fantastic. Christopher Tolkien said he didn't like the American accent. He didn't like the dog. But we said, we're not going to use an American accent. There's going to be no dog. So
there you go.
So he said, fine, go for it. So they've been great. They've been really, really supportive. And HarperCollins produced this single volume edition of the story using our artwork and giving us a little credit on the back. So it's been a fantastic experience.
And I recall one of your disclaimers at the beginning of last night's show was, there is no dog here.
There is no dog, because occasionally
puppets,
people walk out at that point.
No puppets or dogs, I'm out, we're done.
Yeah. So Tolkien 2019 is the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Tolkien Society. People have come here from all over the world. You've performed at a few events like this in the past, right? What makes this kind of an audience, an audience of passionate Tolkien fans, what makes that special for you as a performer?
It makes it especially scary beforehand. But fortunately, what I have on my side is that I tell the story verbatim, so I think we miss out 5 words. So I wasn't too worried, as long as I remembered it, pretty well. I wasn't too worried there would be people following along with the text and raising a hand, saying, "No,
angry wagging
excuse me,
fingers."
That's not right.
You couldn't miss that bit out. So,
that's why we don't do our show live usually.
Yes. But no, I tell you, this has been Oxenmoot and here have been the two, probably the most wonderful experiences of performing that I've ever had in my loosely named career. which I started doing puppetry in 1984, so it's quite a long career. And last night was particularly special, and the response, talking to people after. And we have little books we leave a book out for people after shows to leave comments, and I've toured it around the UK. And looking back over the books of comments, this story really speaks to people. It's has no magic in it per se. It doesn't have, as you know, fairies or wizards or anything in it, but it does have magic. It's a magical little story.
It really is.
Tolkien's miniature masterpiece, I call it.
It's my favorite non-legendary work by far, and I'm really excited to get to it in the podcast in about 7 years.
Right. And it's one that, again, it's one of those that a lot of mainstream, I'm sure most mainstream readers have no idea that it's there, but it's one that I think is really special to Tolkien fans. And those of us who know it really love it.
It's a personal glimpse. Really.
Stephen Colbert mentioned it.
Did he?
About a month ago on his program, he mentioned, he was talking about obscure Tolkien pieces, and he mentioned, and Leaf by Niggle. That was the most obsure one he could think of.
Maybe we should ask him about that.
I would have thought.
Yes, let's ask him.
Beorhthelm.
Homecoming of Beorhthelm.
The Homecoming of Beorhthelm's son. Yeah. That would have been even more obscure, but.
Richard, have you had a chance to participate in any of the other activities here today? Hear any of the talks?
I have. I was at the quiz before, which I could have answered none of it. Confession: I haven't read nearly as much as everybody here, except my wife Elspeth, who confesses she hasn't read The Lord of the Rings. And she's not the only one.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
She did meet a fellow novice earlier on who confessed the same thing.
Well, the good news is I know about a podcast that will help her walk through it.
That's great.
There you go.
Corey Olsen's really good. A lot of the props that you use on stage to help Tolkien's story come to life actually come from your own family's personal history. That was a really fascinating piece last night. It's a rich history with, as you said, if I remember correctly, lives fully lived and lives cut short. That touch made the performance, at least for me, especially powerful. Tell us a little bit about that. How did your family history become a part of this story, and how does it impact you as you're performing it?
Well, I think I know more about my family history having done the show than I did before. It was kind of slightly mysterious because certain things that I had known about in my family, like the fact that my grandfather had his heart was on the wrong side of his body. That strange, quirky thing, which I'd been told as a child, even though I didn't know my grandfather because he died very young, but partly because of his heart. And there's a line in Leaf by Niggle that the second voice says, what was the matter with Niggle? His heart was in the right place. And the other guy says, yes, but it did not function properly. And my grandfather's heart didn't function properly. He when he ran fast, his heart rate didn't increase. So those just those lines. So having mentioned that in this kind of 15-minute introduction that I do at the beginning, when that comes in, it's a little bing, a little echo. But I have a theory that anyone could tell the story using elements from their family history and possibly find fascinating connections of their own,
I bet you're right.
Well, it was a wonderful touch. I could see, I think we all could see how it just made the story more personal to you, and it brought you into the story that much more.
Well, I think having decided to do the story verbatim, I needed to find a connection with it. In the initial phases, we thought of using puppetry because the Trust had said we could now use puppetry. We thought of doing it wordlessly, actually. Or we thought of abridging the story. But when I came to look at the actual text and thought, well, okay, what can you cut out? Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
There isn't a wasted word.
Right.
It is an absolute miracle of economy of writing. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So we said, right, let's do the whole thing. And trust that the dramatic structure would be there. And it's a complicated dramatic structure, but I think it really works. I don't think it needs to be shifted around.
No. Agree completely.
So where do you go from here? I think I heard you say last night that there are no current bookings of the show, but you've had a chance to work with the Tolkien Trust now. Any future projects you're thinking of, or anything you'd like to do?
It's possible. We've done 3 dates at the Edinburgh Fringe just last week, and of Leaf by Niggle. We're going back now to do our other show for 2 weeks, The Man Who Planted Trees. Thereafter, I really hope I can do more of Leaf By Niggle because it's still alive. You know, I still have a fun. Each time I perform it, I think, mustn't put this away in the garage again. This has got to get out there. It's a story that people really need to, not just Tolkien fans, but even some people have said, oh, I don't like Tolkien, but I really like Leaf By Niggle. So it's maybe a good gateway for people who wouldn't naturally respond to, to fantasy, to what they think of as fantasy. Right. So I hope, we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted.
Good. Yes, we'd like that very much. I have one last question. I don't actually, first of all, is Ted, are you here? I'm maybe not seeing you. No? Okay. So we do have time for another question since our third guest isn't even in the room yet. Good. The amazing ability that you have to memorize lines. That was not a short show. No. And it is all you, and it is all characters, all the voices and accents and the difference between spoken dialogue and internal dialogue, and it was all clear, and it was... How in the world do you do that? How do you memorize that much text?
I don't know, because I can't remember PIN codes or telephone numbers. Hopeless. Maybe my I need a bit more RAM or memory or whatever it is. But I just have room for that. But I walk a lot. I walk and go through the lines in my head. So I have a walk that I do from my house down by the Water of Leith in Edinburgh and up into the hills and then back home. We live just on the edge of Edinburgh, and it's a beautiful bit of Edinburgh because you're nearly in the countryside. So I walk, and it's about an hour and a quarter, the walk, so it's long. But I find it's a funny thing memorizing because you can memorize a thing one day, and you go to bed, you think, I've got it absolutely nailed. Wake up next morning, it's completely gone. Yeah. Completely gone. Yeah. So it's layer on layer on layer on layer until you can do it, with distractions going on and things. Because actually I did make an error last night because a prop fell over and it just distracted me enough that I got one word wrong.
Nobody noticed.
I think they pick up on it at all.
But yeah, no, it's layer on layer, principle on principle.
Excellent. Yeah. That was amazing.
Well, and the degree of characterization that you brought to all the different dialogue. I mean, this is something that we try to do when we're reading, when we're just reading on the page, and we try to bring a little characterization to it. Yeah. To watch you at work was really exciting.
Yeah, that was one of the highlights for me.
Well, it was a privilege. It was a privilege. I said to my wife today, Elspeth actually is the technician, did an incredible job last night doing lights and sound on a completely unfamiliar sound and light board. And all the technicians here are fantastic. Mike Purcell and his team, just amazing.
Amazing team.
But I did say to her, I feel really such a privilege to have sort of been entrusted with this story and to present it to such a lovely group of people. Never had a response like that. Never had 400 people standing up at the end. So thank you. Not the honor goes to Professor Tolkien.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was a fantastic show.
Thank you all. Thank
you. Well, folks, it looks like Ted may not be able to join us this time. Maybe he'll be with us on Saturday. So we want to thank you all for coming. There's going to be more time for questions for you, so that's a win-win.
We have a few minutes left.
Yeah. I think, We'll wrap up our little conclusion here, and then we'll get a chance to open it up for questions. But thanks again for coming, and thanks to both of our guests. We really, really appreciated your time today.
And now I think we'll go ahead and open it up for any questions.
Yeah.
Hello. I also greatly enjoyed the Leaf By Niggle performance last night. I think we all thought it was absolutely magical.
Yeah, breathtaking.
And my first introduction to Leaf By Niggle had been the BBC radio adaptation with Alfred Molina. Yeah. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on, the BBC adaptations, the radio adaptations, and have they impacted into the USA very much? It's not something I would know very much about.
That's a good question.
They're very big in the UK, but
I would say that they're not as big in the US as they are in the UK.
No, unfortunately.
But I love the BBC adaptation of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
It's
we're hoping to really be able to talk to Brian about that.
We really
but we'll see.
To talk to Brian about that. It's been wonderful. It's something I love to just put on in the car when I'm driving around and listen to. I think it's I've only known it for a few years, honestly. But it has become one of my favorite adaptations, maybe my favorite adaptation, probably.
eccentric in places, but still wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely wonderful, yes.
Yeah.
Hello. Congratulations starting your 4th season. So as you're looking into the future, your 5th, 6th, 7th season, and you've covered the big 3 of the Legendarium, what are you going to cover next? The next 2 or 3, and why are you going to do that?
Okay.
The follow-up question to that would be, how's the Discord server going? And then what's the future? What's next, since that has been a big success?
That has been a lot of fun. Yeah. What he's referring to, folks, for those of you who are not part of our Patreon family at the Fellowship of the Podcast, Discord server, we have that set up so that people who subscribe to our Patreon thing can listen in live once a month as we record an episode. So they get to hear all the gaffes and goofs, everything that ends up on the editing floor, and a lot of things that wouldn't even end up in our blooper reel. They get to hear me say edit. It's a really entertaining time. And when we
say things that we wouldn't put on our blooper reel, that's a very low bar.
That's a very low bar.
So yeah, it's the stuff like, ooh, we should not have said that.
And then we also have a Discord hangout once a month where we just do kind of an Ask Me Anything sort of, an AMA sort of deal where people can just talk with us and we get a chance to visit with our listeners. I don't know where that's going yet. I don't think we've really it's been going for such a short time that we haven't really put any thought into what we might be doing next there. But I'd be happy to talk about what we're doing in the future of the show. Season 3 was almost a year long. We started it in August or September of last year, and it just ended. And we've already roadmapped out Season 4.
Which is, again, Book 2 of
Book 2 of Lord of the Rings.
Half of Fellowship.
So we're still going to get through Fellowship of the Ring, in about another year. It's going to take us... We start September 15th, and I think we roadmapped it out, and it ends sometime in early August again. So if it takes that pace, we're looking at another 5 years before we even finish The Lord of the Rings.
5 years, 4 seasons. I think Season 8 would probably be the second half of Return of the King.
That's correct. Season 8 would be the...
Before we figured out what to do with the appendices.
That's right. And I think we'll include the appendices probably in Season 8 because it's a shorter book. We were thinking that maybe Season 9 would be... kind of a miscellaneous Legendarium collection. We'd talk about Unfinished Tales. We'd probably skip the line about, the entire line of all the kings. It's just a history book. But we would, love to talk about Eldarion and
Arendis. And its realms. I don't know, maybe we could go.
So there's a lot of things in Unfinished Tales we'd want to talk about. We'd probably pull some pieces from History of Middle-earth. We're not so crazy as to think that we would do a 30-year run on the History of Middle-earth.
And I just don't know that it would.
No.
The truth is we've mined History of Middle-earth
and we will continue to be mining
and we've mined
it,
Unfinished Tales along the way. And so there is some stuff in Unfinished
Tales
we won't have had a chance to touch probably.
That's correct. And it'll be good to take 2 or 3 episodes to talk about, let's say, the Athrobeth or something like that. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to do a season of non-Legendarium work. So that's when we'll finally get to tackle Leaf by Niggle along with Smith and Farmer Giles and Roverandom and whatever else we want to throw in there. And then we've talked about the idea of our last season being, let's go back to the Silmarillion again. Let's recap full circle.
Do it the way we would have done it then.
Do it as if we, exactly. Do it what we would have, knowing now what we didn't know then. So, yeah.
Your podcast is always educational, but it's also entertaining, and I often laugh out loud.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's a missed opportunity here, because one of the things that's always intrigued me about Lord of the Rings is all the conversations that never happen. I would love to see Gandalf have a chat with Shelob.
Oh, yeah.
Your characterizations are so good. I would really love to see something
or perhaps
where you do those conversations that never happen.
So, like maybe the Treebeard and Ungoliant sketch.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
So dramatic.
Old Man Willow and Treebeard. There's a whole conversation.
They've got to have some history, I would think. That's fun. I mean, that's interesting.
That is interesting. I like that. That might become a new introductory segment. Conversations that never happened, and we could throw in chats. But that would be a lot of fun, actually. That's going to be an intro segment now.
You've opened the door with that one, Lynn.
Oh, that's going to be fun. That's going to be good stuff.
Hello, my name's Brad, and obviously...
Good to see you finally.
Good to see you, Brad.
It's an absolute pleasure to have been here, to have heard the last hour or so. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'd just like to say, probably on behalf of so many people who are here and not here as well, what an amazing show you've got. I know you get so many people saying it, but for me personally, I've got to say that your show provides something that so much out there doesn't right now. There's not much that grabs my attention anyway, really. So the radio is kind of a little bit, a bit of a kind of a lost thing for me, unfortunately. But when I'm driving in the car, whether I'm working, listening to you guys, it really is absolutely fantastic listening. So first of all, thank you. I would say don't ever change anything. There's a lot of, I know in the past you've had a lot of fans come and say, yeah, we want you guys to argue a bit more and, disagree, but don't go Jerry Springer on us, because that really wouldn't be, I don't think that would be the right thing. It's always really good when you genuinely disagree on something. So that's what provides such fantastic discussions. And I suppose, really, for me, the kind of questions that I've got kind of one really specific one and one a bit more sort of generalist. The specific one relates to an episode recently with Garth and Dal. Okay. And how there's a moment where I think he turns around and he looks back at Aragorn before he's called out. Yeah. Is that right? So I know I've just been listening to this recently, and I know, Shawn, you said, you guys didn't do a good job hiding. And so one thing I thought, well, is there something there with him that he just felt his presence and knew he was there? Is that kind of is it a possibility where he's got that ability to feel and sense that he's there and he just knew?
He's a pretty powerful elf. That's entirely
it seems very possible.
Yeah. As far as changing things, we'll still change up. We'll mix up segments. We'll do new things, but I don't think we're going to be able to force ourselves to disagree. So those folks who don't like that we don't fight enough, they may not like the show, but. The humor will always be there. That's part of who we are. And as much as we enjoy these interviews, and actually these are our favorite things to do. When we talk to Tom Shippey and Verlin Flieger and people like that, it's just a phenomenal experience. But for those of you who never heard us, the shows that are not interview shows are often laugh out loud funny. I'm not sure how that happens.
I don't know.
Somebody must do something with them.
It's greater than the sum of its parts.
That is certainly true. This is 2 + 2 = 17 at some point. But we won't change that.
On the arguing, I thought for sure that we were going to have a knockdown, drag-out argument in episode 121 about what is Tom Bombadil. And we both ended up just landing in the same place. We did independent research. We both prepared our arguments for what we thought Tom Bombadil was, and we talked it through for 45 minutes
at least,
50 minutes. And by the end of it, we both just realized, did we just come to the same conclusion about...
We were going to finally throw those people a bone.
The biggest enigma in Tolkien's writings. Exactly. And we managed to come up with the same conclusion.
I think we have time for maybe one more very, very quick question, because we're getting the time signal here. Andy. Who, by the way, was our very first guest on the show. He and Dimitra Fimi came on and talked about A Secret Vice.
Well, and guys, I've been with you from the beginning, and I think you are incredible, and I look forward to every episode. And what I really love, and it kind of follows on from what Lynn was saying. Also, what I love about the show too are those lovely little moments where you have like philology moment and things like. Obviously, I love philology moment, of course. But do you have ideas for other types of things like that? Because what I like about it, it also allows you to kind of impart some special little Tolkien knowledge or things like that. Yeah. So any ideas on how you're going to kind of continue those and new ones and things like that?
We're always looking for a new intro segment. During our hiatus, we kind of kick around ideas.
Yeah, we've kicked around a few ideas. We've done a lot of Tolkien fun facts and things like that in the past.
Philology fair. Quote of the week or quote
of the what happened on this week.
Yeah.
In
this week in Tolkien history.
I think one thing I'd like to do more of is maybe more Tolkien history segments.
Yeah.
Bringing in more of his biography and his times. So I think that's probably a segment we'll have coming in the near future.
Most likely, yeah.
Philology fair is my favorite.
I love philology.
It's good to have a word nerd on your team. That's for sure. It is. Folks, I know we're going to wrap up. So I just want to let you know we got merchandise here. We're going to wrap that up so they can get on with the next segment here. I think they're reconfiguring the room. I'm going to at least hang out outside for a little bit if you have some more questions. I think Shawn's got a coffee clutch to go to. But we'll be out here, and we'll look forward to talking to you. But thank you again so much.
Thank you all so much for coming.
So that was our Thursday segment at Tolkien 2019, and you might have noticed that we were missing one of our planned guests.
Yeah, indeed. It turns out we got some wires crossed with Ted Nasmith, but he was kind enough to join us for a one-on-one in the hotel lobby later in the week. But before we visit with Ted, we want to tell you about a new sponsor here at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Now here's the thing. Did you know that socks are the most requested clothing item in homeless shelters? Bombas is on a mission to change that. They've created what might be the most comfortable socks in, the history of feet. But what makes them really special is that for every single pair of socks you purchase, Bombas donates a pair to someone in need. In fact, they've donated more than 20 million pairs so far.
Socks from Bombas are designed with special comfort innovations, colors, patterns, lengths, and styles, so they're perfect for the whole family. Get your hands on a pair of Bombas socks, and your feet will thank you.
And every pair includes arch support, a seamless toe, and a cushy footbed that feels good but isn't too thick. And with all those styles, Bombas socks make a perfect gift for anyone on your list.
My favorites from Bombas are the merino wool quarter socks. I got them for winter, but they're breathable and cool enough to wear year-round. They're soft, colorful, and itch-free, so I've been wearing them both out of the house and when I'm staying at home with a good book.
And I wear my cushion no-show socks just about any time I'm not wearing sandals. I love them. Great quality, super comfy. Truth is, though, the thing that I like most about Bombas is knowing that every time I buy a pair, someone else who needs a pair is getting them too. Save 20% on your first purchase when you shop at bombas.com/PPP. That's BOMBAS.com/PPP to save 20%. Bombas.com/PPP.
And thanks to Bombas for partnering with us on this. Now let's get back to our conversations at Tolkien 2019 as we step into the lobby of the McDonald Burlington in Birmingham with famed Tolkien artist Ted Nasmith. Okay, well now we're sitting down privately with another celebrated artist and one of the best-known names in Tolkien and fantasy art and illustration.
That's right. His illustrations have appeared in the official Tolkien calendar as far back as 1987, including the official Tolkien The Centenary calendar for 1992. And they've appeared on the covers of numerous publications of and about Tolkien's works.
But he's probably best known for the gorgeous 2004 illustrated hardcover edition of The Silmarillion, and also the 2003 illustrated edition of Robert Foster's Complete Guide to Middle-earth.
Now, it's his first time on the Prancing Pony Podcast, but hopefully not the last. Please welcome Ted Nasmith.
Hi, guys.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you so much for joining us.
Really appreciate it.
Well, so this is your first time on the Prancing Pony Podcast, so we have to ask you a question that we ask everybody who comes onto the show. When and how did you first discover Tolkien's work, and when did you make the move from just being a reader and fan to doing illustrations based on his work?
Right. It's kind of an interesting story. My sister, my older sister, who knew so much more than I did, was hanging out with her friends in high school, and they were Tolkien fans, and this was in the 60s. Not that many people knew about it, but there was a group there, and she said to me, "You probably like this." You know, she handed me the Fellowship of the Ring, and the covers were the Barbara Remington triptych at the time, which I'd seen in the store, and I could have sworn it was a science fiction novel because it looked like a rocket taking off. That's how weird the art was.
Yeah, the abstraction of those covers.
And the flamingo, the emus, the pink emus, right, that whole thing.
Very alien.
I start reading this thing, and I'm thinking science fiction, so, no expectations whatsoever, and it's all about this kind of English Shire kind of setting and fairy tale and wizards, and I'm like, whoa, this is great, I love this, and it just it hit me. So I'm just like, okay, I'm in. And being a young art student at the time, having never had thoughts of doing fairy art or anything like that, it was all about car illustration and other sorts of things like that, or science fiction maybe. Suddenly find myself wanting to draw pictures and scenes and characters from Lord of the Rings. So it started pretty soon after I read the books. Before I'd read The Hobbit, I was drawing stuff that fit into my idea of what this book would be about. And there were no other illustrators particularly going on at the time.
Right.
Later, I started to form this idea that this book deserves really, really good art. It's it's underserved, and it's just generally considered to be another fantasy book, a sort of slightly lowbrow fiction, so on. And I thought, no, it's much deeper and much more important to that. Yeah. And I want to bring something like that to it with my own art, and so reflect that in a kind of realistic, epic style, which gelled over time.
Something away from the sort of the childish illustration, very simple fairy tale kind of illustration.
Exactly, or the conventional things. And so I'm looking back to Arthur Rackham and other kinds of traditional fantasy artists, and whatever I could find that could sort of flesh out my ideas of that. And I soon, of course, start gravitating to the landscapes, and that was inspiration from 19th century epic paintings I've just seen in the Birmingham Museum here, and some extraordinary work there as well. And I'm like, it's that romanticism and the sort of epic style as well would really fit with Lord of the Rings, I thought.
Yeah, definitely does.
Well, you've been a member of organizations like the Tolkien Society and the Mythopoeic Society for a long time. What's your favorite thing about an event like this, and what are you most looking forward to, or maybe what you most appreciated so far at the conference?
Well, what I look for, I guess, is just an opportunity to be more available to people, to be able to, like this kind of thing, with interviews, and just come out of my kind of cave, my studio, and experience the love of others and just old acquaintances. Many of them I've known since the 80s, and it's just like, it's very affirming for me, and I go home really kind of quite pumped up. And
that's great.
And of course I learn a lot too, because the levels of Tolkien scholarship, from linguistics to all sorts of other studies and areas and specialties, is extraordinary. And the other artists who I also get a lot from, and we talk to each other, and that's a chance to interact with them. It's a really, really great feast of things, and just the quieter moments when you get a chance to have a conversation with someone, and you start to really kind of get into things that you didn't even expect to, and it's just, all of that is wonderful, and it really is what makes it so worthwhile. It is tremendously wonderful and rewarding to me to gather with other people.
It's really nice to be among your people,
And I get to travel, which is really nice too. Really nice, I've seen a lot of places I would never have gotten to, like Brazil, a couple times now, and some other places that are just never probably been possible for me to afford to go to.
Get that. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the show. I wouldn't have even come to Oxford last year. So it really is an opportunity.
I've been to a number of Mythopoeic Society gatherings, their MythCons, although not so many lately, but again, just a fabulous group of people.
They really are amazing over there.
Remarkable folks all around, still very much endearing. And actually, one of the wonderful things that came out of the 2005 Aston Birmingham conference, which was like this one, it was about 4 or 5 days,
big one,
was an idea came up that Mike Foster came up with, called the Lord of the Ringos. It was like taking the Beatles music, setting lyrics to it, filking it as it were, and then playing the same tunes and so on, which I knew well because I'm a big Beatles fan.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And Foster gives this talk about how the Beatles themselves wanted to film Lord of the Rings.
Yes, that's right. I think John wanted to be the Gollum,
and they wanted Stanley Kubrick to be the director.
So thank God it didn't work. But anyway, it's a little piece of history that we could have capitalized on. What if? And so we got to perform that at one MythCon.
That's great.
It's just wonderful and just fun. So
that's there. Great. What's been the high point for you so far? We're about halfway through the conference now.
Well, the Leaf By Niggle drama performance there, very moving. I've always loved that story. It just speaks to the artistic sort of ambitions and the desire to be remembered, and this isn't something that just fades away after you're gone. You're putting your life's work into something like that, and it's clearly an allegory of Tolkien's, his own feelings about his own work, and his some insecurities about whether it really would endure, and so on.
It's far and away the most intimate work of his, and that's.
But as Tom Shippey said, it may well be the author of the 21st century as well as the 20th. And he seems to be, no sign of his fading off anytime soon. Father of modern fantasy and still holding his own. It's just lovely.
And possibly only getting bigger with
new Amazon
Indeed, as we see it being adapted.
Agreed.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your art. A couple of times this week we've heard you talk about how it's generally your intention to be as close to the text as possible. You've said you always go back to Tolkien's words, and you've even sort of distanced yourself a little bit from some of the other visual designs. The film adaptations have such a strong visual design that's very influential to a lot of people.
Sure.
And you always go back to the words. Can you tell us how working in that context, how does that impact your approach? Is that limiting in any way, or is it actually liberating?
I feel like there's no way I would want to try to spread myself in the ideas and style or anything like that beyond what is working for me and what is working for fans. And I'm conscious of that relationship as I go along, and I know what they appreciate about what I do, and I know that that's what I want to do. And we've got this kind of thing going on so that it's self-perpetuating. I don't need to I mean, I guess I've positioned myself as the book illustrator. That's always been my main ambition. I have had opportunities to go elsewhere and be part of another kind of project or another medium, and it just doesn't seem to have been in the cards for whatever reason. And I seem to be doing very well just by sticking with the books. And it wasn't any kind of moral decision particularly. I could easily have ended up working on the films. It would have been paid very, very well, and it would have been a solid contribution to it. Yeah. But the idea of subsuming my work into the work of a huge number of other people didn't really appeal to me that much. I was hoping to work for my studio if I was to do any kind of work for that. But as it worked out, they wanted everyone there. It was an indeterminate amount of time, and it was a very difficult time for me personally, actually. So I just let go of it and went to the cinema when it opened and just had, carte blanche. We'll see what they've come up with here. Yeah. And it was lovely that way.
Must have been an interesting experience.
Yes,
definitely. From your perspective, just visual design is the thing you're looking at the whole time.
Right. Because we all think, when all those years of just having the books and that's it, and there's no kind of Bakshi, right. The BBC adaptation, which was lovely, and absolutely, to me, set the bar.
Oh, absolutely.
And the music and everything, but still, it was interesting to see a full-fledged treatment like that. You never thought it could be done.
No,
Here we are. It's now the technology has caught up with the book, and so it has its value, obviously, and it's brought people to the books as well.
Yes.
There was 700% rise in sales of the books after the films came out, which was amazing, and that's great for everybody. So it just seemed easy enough to stick with the books as far as my own kind of approach. I like painting pictures. That's kind of the form I think is I'm meant to be part of.
What about in places when you're going back to Tolkien's words? What about places where the text is silent or not all that detailed? One of the pictures that you showed us the other day was Dal Amroth, which is a place that is barely mentioned in the book. How do you work with that?
Well, because by now covered a lot of the main scenes, not everything, but a lot of the main scenes, the ones that I feel like I've got something to add to or to contribute to. You start turning to the in-between things as well, and they often are more interesting because it's pure kind of my own kind of approach and appreciation of Tolkien, and what can I do with this moment and make it more interesting as a picture. Well, that's sort of self-rewarding, and I've come to just enjoy that part of it as much as anything else. And fans seem to agree with me, which is nice.
It definitely seems to be resonating with readers and fans. It's the feedback we see on your work and the feedback we have on your work. It's truly having an impact. So
don't get too many people criticizing me the odd time, and my partner is always good for that doesn't look quite right, maybe you should try this and so on like that. Well, that's important. I need honesty. It's easy to kind of get into a bubble and think that everything you can do is brilliant, but no. Actually, I'm a very hard critic of myself, I must say.
I edit our shows. I know what you mean about being a harsh critic of our own material.
With that level of perfectionism, that much detail, and all the things that go into a picture from start to finish, it's easy to feel like, am I navigating this the right way and so on. And I've really come up with what I feel is satisfactory. And, you can overthink it. There's all those things. Potentially you overpaint things. That's a common problem for something like what I do. People say the sketches are really nice because they're lively. They're kind of more loose and easy. And I say, I see what you mean. So that level is good, but I will never really abandon doing things in a realistic way. It's just my thing, and that's what I love doing.
Well, we love it too.
We do. We really do.
Great. All right. Win-win.
Yeah, no doubt. Of course, you're best known as an artist, a visual artist, but you're also a musician and a songwriter.
Right.
And you've done some musical projects related to Tolkien. There was an album called The Hidden Door, Songs in the Key of Enchantment.
Yes.
And also a song cycle based on Beren and Luthien. Tell us just a little bit about these projects.
Yes, the Beren and Luthien and Fall of Gondolin CDs are 2 of 4 musical projects by Paul C. Godfrey, a Welsh composer, who's one of the only people who's ever had the rights to a musical license granted by the estate. And he's used his time very well and very productively. The Lanty Opera Company of South Wales came to him and said, we would like to record these wonderful works, these elaborate works. And so that's how that got going. And then they contacted me for cover art, and I've had a lovely sort of correspondence with one of the tenors, and he's also the graphic guy that ended up kind of doing that and stick handling all that. And yeah, so it's exciting to be part of that project, to have met Paul here, and he's had a preview performance as well. It's one of the nice things about this convention as well. You know, introduce people to that. It was very well received. And then the personal recording, the CD I did, was culmination of years of wanting to do a proper, professional level recording. And my brother, who's the big musician of the family and who I hang out with a lot when it comes to the music side of things, he and I, he helped me a great deal on sort of the soloing and other stuff and extra tracks on top. And that is all fairy themed, with 3 songs that are adaptations of Tolkien's poems. And all of that was very dear to me, that I was able to express it and get it out and make it available to people. And unfortunately, it was 2007. I've had requests many times for a second or a third recording, and it hasn't happened, unfortunately, because of my time and schedule.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm kind of busy with my bands, with my brother, and which is a lot of fun, but it's not really going to advance my own personal music that much.
It's just fun. Hey, you got to have some fun.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I love playing bass. I'm a bass player and a singer, and I also sing in a choir, which is also my brother's choir. He's a music director. He's like Mr. Jack of all trades with music, and he plays many instruments as well. So he and I just really get on well with that, and we sound good together because, of course, we're brothers, as you know. And we have another brother who's also musical, so we're a very kind of musical family and
very gifted,
artistic. Yeah, kind of is. We're not sure how, because neither of our parents were, even writing or music or art or anything particularly. But it must have come down a few generations, because there are some.
Just a good mix of genes.
Some of the ancestors showed that sort of thing.
So how does your approach to musical adaptation of Tolkien's work differ, or maybe how is it similar to your approach to visual art? Right,
good question. I should also mention that a longtime friend, Alex Lewis, who's now my agent for originals and commissions, he and I go back to '85 when I borrowed a guitar from him in Oxford for my first Oxenmoot. And he trusted me with his guitar. He thought, as long as you're not going to damage it at all. And then we end up writing to each other. And it turned out he was a musician. Yeah. There's a story about why that happened, who started doing that crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, we digress, so that's all right.
So he turns out to be a musician and writer of his own, a novel writer as well as musician, and an all-around bard. So he's writing a lot of Tolkien-inspired music, and I had ideas of doing the same thing. We ended up collaborating a few years later on a Baron and Luthien song cycle. It's never been recorded, and it has been recorded, but it's never been released or anything, because it's kind of a demo level, not professionally finished or anything. And we would never be able to get a license to sell it properly. But the estate's restrictions on these things, I'm not sure how long that's going to extend, but it's been a few decades now. And it's frustrating for many artists, unfortunately. But there it is. So I sell it kind of a little quietly sometimes, or just make a copy for whoever. It's a really a 2-disc set that can be now fit on all one disc. It's 20 songs, and I conceived of the music of it. Then we went back, and Alex said, well, actually, I have musical settings as well. And so he shared that with me, and I realized that some of his settings for the same lyrics were actually rather good. In a couple of cases, I blended them with mine. Or in other cases, I just adopted his version and then kind of polished it up a bit. So it was a wonderful creative experience, and I'm really proud of it. It, I think, really captures the feel and the poignancy of that story, and the kind of the solemnness and almost sadness of it as well. It always shot through with a kind of tragedy.
Absolutely.
And you have to capture that. So
you almost forget about how tragic it is, because the next thing you read is the tale of Turin Turenbar.
Right.
And because of that, anything else that's mildly tragic
makes it look like a heroic.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's true.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Ted, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure having you on, and we'd love to have you back on sometime, maybe for a full episode.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ted.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Well, good afternoon, Little Masters, and welcome to the second part of episode 136 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where once again you're going to get to watch my co-host and me outside of our comfort zones.
Several thousand miles outside of our comfort zone.
About 5,000,
Yeah.
Well, folks with us here in the room today, thank you for joining us at the second of the 2 sessions that we're recording here at Tolkien 2019, the 50th anniversary celebration of the Tolkien Society.
It's something we've been truly honored to be a part of. we're going to welcome some of the special guests here at Tolkien 2019 to join us, and we'll get to know them, and they're the ones we're really here to see.
Well, that is the point. And if we can manage to keep a few minutes of free time at the end, we would love to be able to take a couple of questions from our live audience. But before we dive in, we want to once again thank all the folks who made this live episode possible. And now I think there are far too many of them to name. But we want to at least include Carl and Mike and Andy and
Matthew,
absolutely. Thank you so much for your help in helping pull this off.
And of course, a huge thank you to the special guests who are willing to share their time with us here today, Brian Sibley, Bill Fliss, and Dimitra Fimi.
Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get things rolling. Our first guest today is a multi-award-winning dramatist and author who's written over 100 hours of radio drama, including productions of and about Tolkien's works.
I think he's probably best known in this room for the acclaimed 1981 BBC radio dramatization of The Lord of the Rings, which he co-wrote, and the 1992 radio dramatization of Tales from the Perilous Realm. He's also written several books about Peter Jackson's movies, such as The Lord of the Rings, The Making of the Movie Trilogy, and The Lord of the Rings Official Movie Guide.
Making his first appearance on the Prancing Pony Podcast, and we also hope it's not his last, we are thrilled to have him. Please welcome Brian Sibley. Well, since this is your first time on the Prancing Pony Podcast, we have to ask the question that we ask everybody who comes on the show. When and how did you first discover Tolkien's works? And then how did you first get this, the BBC radio dramatization off the ground?
School library. I was about 11 or 12 years old, I guess. And I loved books, but I was a very slow reader because I'd learnt to read quite late on in life. Mm-hmm. So reading a book was a major investment of time for me. But I quite like big books, but not too big. I'll come back to that in a minute. So anyway, this book really intrigued me. And it wasn't what it was called, The Hobbit. It wasn't anything that I read in it. It was just that wonderful landscape of Tolkien's that wraps around the book. Yeah. The mountains, the trees, the river, the dragon flying across.
Draws you right in, doesn't it?
And I think that really, I thought, what is this book about? And of course, it's very, very easy immediately to get drawn into The Hobbit because the way Tolkien sort of suckers you in with the way in which he tells the tale. You know, the meeting, the whole description of the Hobbit hole, and then the encounter with Gandalf and the banter between Gandalf and Bilbo. So I loved it. However, when it came to The Lord of the Rings, which I, of course, rushed out and bought the one-volume paperback edition because I wanted more, I found it really quite difficult and daunting. And I got hung up on the prologue, all that stuff about pipeweed and stuff, and I thought, I don't know what this is all about. And I didn't read it for years and years and years until I read other books. I read Farmer Giles, Smith of Wootton Major, Tom Bombadil, Leaf By Niggle, but I didn't read the big fat book and until I was 21, and I had a duodenal ulcer, and I was confined in hospital, and then I needed a big book to get me through what was, I think, about 3 or 4 weeks of complete bed rest. They don't do that anymore, but they did then. So there I was with this big fat book, which I got my mum and dad to bring into me in hospital. And once I thought, I'm not going to read this prologue thing. I've tried to read it several times. So I started with chapter 1. And by the end of chapter 1, I was thinking, I'm hooked on this book. And the next time my parents came to visit me, I said, can you bring me a torch? And after lights out, because this is in the draconian days of my youth when lights went out, you couldn't have a light on after certain hours. I was under the bedclothes like I'd been when I was 6 or 7 reading books by torchlight. So that's how I got hooked. But then years and years later, I was desperately trying to get, I was already starting to write for radio, and I was trying to get some new projects off the ground. And I sent some ideas to the BBC, and they kept rejecting them. But in those days, they were very civil, the BBC. It was very kind of, over the school and jolly good stuff. And so they wrote back and said, no, I don't think we can do that, actually. I was trying to sell them E.M. Forster's Morris, which was the posthumous book that had been published of his, which, of course, is about homosexuality. And the BBC wasn't quite up for that. No, I don't think I'm quite right for the BBC. Anything else you'd like to do? And I just sent them a load of books that I really liked to the list. And of course, I thought, what's the biggest thing I know? I know Lord of the Rings. They'll never do it. And little did I know that the BBC was negotiating with one Saul Zaentz to get the radio rights. As it turned out, Saul Zaentz didn't own the radio rights. They were owned by the publishers, George Allen and Unwin. Right. But they got the rights, and because I'd expressed an interest, they took a great gamble by allowing this rookie, which is what I was. I mean, I was pretty much unknown, to embark on breaking the book down into 26 episodes that sorted out the chronology, because Tolkien's chronology is quite different to a dramatic chronology.
Right.
And then with a very, very experienced writer, a man called Michael Bakewell, who'd done War and Peace, so he knew what he was doing. I then, with him, we wrote 13 episodes apiece, and, well, the rest, as they say, is history. I would just add, because people often, they have this idea when something terrific is done, or something which endures, let me put it that way, that everybody involved must have known they were creating something. And I can tell you absolutely honestly that none of us did. I was listening to an interview I did many years later with the producer Jane Morgan, and she was remembering that she was sitting at home on the day of the first episode, sitting in front of the radio, and a couple of friends had said, "Shall we come round and listen to it together?" She said, "No, I don't want anybody there," because none of us really knew whether we'd pulled it off, because it was a big, it was half a year of radio listening. Would people take to it? Would they listen to it? Would they, like the characters? Would they follow the story? And then, of course, as she goes on to say, she remembered the rest of the afternoon where people ringing up and saying, "Boy, when's the next one?" So it was great. But we didn't know we were creating something, I think, which is a piece of, in British terms, maybe world terms actually, a piece of radio history.
I think so. I think so, and I think I speak for everyone in this room when I say thank you for doing it.
Yes,
absolutely.
You're thanking a lot of people. Not just me, you're thanking, a whole mass of actors and performers and musicians and so on. So, yeah, many people.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, we know you're an honorary member of the Tolkien Society.
I am. I'm very proud of it, too. I'm wearing the badge. This is a gold badge. It was presented to me by Priscilla Tolkien. I think it was a couple of years after I had, maybe the year after the broadcast, when the BBC repeated it. And I came down to Oxenmoot. I say down to Oxenmoot. I'm actually in Birmingham now, aren't we? But I went to Oxford, and there's a pub called the Turf Tavern. And all I can remember about it was a bit like an investiture with the Queen, actually. Priscilla was on some sort of a little rostrum, I seem to remember. I may be exaggerating this. And I had to walk up, and I was given this gold badge, and it was all, it was very kind of wonderful. But yes, I'm extremely proud of that.
As well you should be, yes.
Absolutely.
Well earned.
So you must have done, obviously you've done many events like this in the past. With this being the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Tolkien Society, what's made this event special for you? What's been the highlight for you, just as a fan?
The highlight has been being able to get a few hours sleep at night, actually. I'm joking, but these things, as everybody knows, whether you're a guest or you're somebody participating in the experience, it's exhausting. It's full on. I'm just looking through the program and thinking, oh, where's the lunch break? There must be a break here. Where, lunch? No, there isn't a break for lunch. No. Oh, it must start about no, it starts at 9. All right, and it finishes. It'll be finished in time. Oh no, it doesn't till half past. So that was a challenge. But what's been good about it? Of course, meeting a lot of old friends. I mean, some of the other guests here who I know from other events, but also from people that I've met. Some of them I've not met for many, many years. For me, when the radio series started, Radio Times, which is the official magazine, did an article about the program, and it had pictures of me talking to the North Farthing Smile, some of the members, and some of the members of the people who were pictured there in outlandish costumes, some of them, they are here at this event, and it's been great catching up with them as well. So it's been terrific from that, and just being with people who love something that I love.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think even for us, and this is my first Tolkien Society event. Yours second.
I made it to Oxenmoot last year.
Yeah, but I think even
not in the official capacity of the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, shame.
Just as an attendee.
Yeah, but I think even for us, it's a bit like coming home. It's like coming back, coming to your family.
Well, I was saying yesterday, the concept of the road going ever on and on, but also the road goes circular, and as it does for Frodo and then later for Sam, you do come back to where you started. Rings are not just things that go around a finger or things of great power. Rings are also the circular things in life that I find that link people together and relink you and that join you up with people that maybe, on that fellowship. Because I think this is an organization which is about fellowship, very much so.
Absolutely.
I'm going to shorten this next question because, actually, I'm going to have you shorten the next answer.
I'll shorten the next answer.
We want to touch a little bit.
Yes? Would you rather have yes?
No, I don't know. It might not be a yes or no question. But after the Lord of the Rings radio drama, you did Tales from the Perilous Realm, and one of the things that you did there was include a dramatization of Tom's scenes from the Lord of the Rings, which makes yours really not exactly the only adaptation, but certainly the only well-known adaptation. To include Tom, and I just want to get a little bit of, tell us about that choice and what you decided.
I took a lot of stick for taking Tom out of the Lord of the Rings, and I wanted to pay that back in a way. There is no such thing as Tales of the Perilous Realm, or there wasn't until I gave it that title.
Really?
HarperCollins filched it, but it's okay. It's okay, HarperCollins. Yeah, have it as a gift. But I wanted to put Tom in there with the other stories I love, Farmer Giles and Smith of Wootton Major.
Right.
And it was an opportunity to have some of the poems, but also to catch up on that story of the meeting with Old Man Willow, with Tom and Goldberry and the Barrow Wights, and just fill in that little hole that I had unfortunately left in the saga. So that's why I wanted it to be there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up for this segment. Thank you
very
much.
Well, it's been a joy to be here. Thank you.
And
So
we would love to have you back.
And you were saying about selling your shirts. If it's this one you're wearing, I think I'd rather not. But
Thank you.
It's the official podcast costume. This isn't how I dress. I'm a shirt and tie guy. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, Brian. We'd like to go ahead and welcome our next guest right now. Someone we spoke to not too long ago on the podcast, actually, Bill Fliss. Hold on for the title. The archivist at the Department of Special Collections and University Archives at the Raynor Memorial Libraries at Marquette University.
That's not going to shorten to Spabimi or anything like that, is it?
No, that's it.
Well, you know that place as the home of the original manuscripts of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and several of Tolkien's other works. Bill's building a collection of oral testimonials from Tolkien fans all over the world for the J.R.R. Tolkien Fandom Oral History Collection, and we are looking forward to hearing the latest on that.
Yep. So, Bill Fliss, welcome back to the Prancing Pony Podcast, and it's great to see you in person this time.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Thank you for having me back. I'd like to actually start with a couple other thank yous. Thanks for having me follow someone as articulate and as engaging as Brian Sibley. And then the other thank you is for having me talk last time about the project, because many of the interviews I got in subsequent weeks mentioned that they had heard about it from the Prancing Pony. So
good.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Glad to know that our listeners are helping you out.
Yeah, it's going very well. Last week Thursday, I launched the site with the first 2 AO-Reds of the host. Again, the concept behind it is that I'm attempting to gather 6,000 up to 3-minute testimonials from Tolkien fans, talking about how they first encountered Tolkien's works, what he's meant to them, why they're a fan. And I'm grouping it into AO-Reds of 120, and I'll publish them in those groupings until I reach 6,000. So I launched the site with the first 2 AO-Reds, and I've been gathering interviews here at Tolkien 2019.
That's great to hear, and hopefully you've gotten a lot of them.
Yeah, I think I've accumulated about 50 so far, and I'm hoping for some more before I leave.
I'm sure it's kept you busy.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think everybody here is busy. It's so heavily scheduled. There's so much to go see.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about is something that we've seen here at the conference, just sort of walking around. There's a large banner, poster, I guess, out there. It looks like exactly the sort of thing that an archivist would assemble. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I can describe it. It'd be tough for the listeners not being able to see it, but it's essentially a 20-plus foot long scroll that's adorning one of the walls here in the hotel. And it represents an attempt to map out the manuscript collection at Marquette University for The Lord of the Rings, a collection which encompasses 9,250 pages of manuscript material. And so it's an attempt to conceptualize the collection and to map it out and to understand how Professor Tolkien created The Lord of the Rings, the order in which he created it, and the way the different drafts of different chapters fit together.
That's great.
So the last time we had you on the show, we didn't get a chance to talk much about your everyday work as a Tolkien archivist. Now, what's that like? What is it? What's your day-to-day work
What's a day in the life of an archivist look like?
Well, my role at Marquette as Tolkien archivist is really only supposed to take about 50% of my time, but Tolkien will take over your entire life, as many fans know. And so increasingly it's crept and taken it. So at this point it's probably 100% of my time while I have all of these projects going. Fortunately, my boss is very understanding and lets me work with the collection almost exclusively right now. So it's basically bouncing around from collection to collection or project to project related to Tolkien, whether it's the manuscript reprocessing project or the fandom oral history project or the fanzine digitization project, which is the third project I have going right now, an attempt to digitize early Tolkien fanzines. And also then there's the ubiquitous emails. I have to reach the point where I only check my email at certain points in the day because otherwise I'll just be watching my inbox all day. We are, obviously, we have a reading room where researchers come to do research, so I'm oftentimes, if I'm not working on one of these projects or typing emails, I'm out working with the researcher to help them use the materials. And I know many of the people here at Tolkien 2019 have visited archives in their own research on Tolkien, so I think they understand, many of you understand what it's like to come to an archives.
Mm-hmm. And Tolkien's manuscripts are notoriously hard to work with, aren't they? I mean, the handwriting and the speed with which he was writing. I mean, if you just read the history of Middle-earth, even Christopher kind of gives you this impression of it was really difficult to work with this stuff. Has that made you, since you work with it so much, are you one of the people out there that people rely on to help decipher that stuff?
I do my best, but there are people out there that can read his handwriting much better than I can. One of the motivations for me to do the manuscript reprocessing project was to make the collection more accessible, because key to that project is the digitizing of the entire collection and the ability for researchers who visit Marquette to be able to interact with the digital scans. And this can help in deciphering some of those difficult words and helping to read his notoriously difficult handwriting. And some people have commented to me who I've done test runs with the scans that it really does improve the experience and make it much easier to work with. Because at this point, and for the last 30 years actually, researchers who visited Marquette have had to study the manuscripts, not in their original form, because Marquette decided back around in the early 1980s that the manuscripts were too valuable to just be used by researchers on site. And so researchers use either microfilm. Those of you who know what microfilm is, it was a cutting-edge technology 100 years ago, or photocopies. But now, hopefully, we can segue into the digital scans for people to use.
That's great, and it's probably much easier to index and to find. I mean, I know microfilm indexing was. I remember doing microfilm research once upon a time, but
microfilm is wonderful. I mean, it's actually an excellent preservation format. However, it is not easy to use. The digital scans and the ability to embed metadata into the scans to orient where people are and what they're looking at will really help with the research process.
Okay. Well, for our listeners at home, can you remind folks of how they can become a part of the J.R.R. Tolkien Fandom Oral History Collection?
Yes. We have on our website a link to a scheduling page where you can claim a slot, reserve a slot, where I will then send you an invite with a Zoom link using Zoom video conferencing where we can connect and I can capture the audio over the internet. Just the audio is captured, not the video, but I do like to have the video link so I can see the person and then act as timekeeper interacting with them on the video screen. Usually about the middle of the month, I'll put the next month's slots out on the scheduling page, so if your listeners can keep an eye on that site, and hopefully there'll be a slot that fits with their schedule. I know some people, there's a great time zone difference between where they are and Milwaukee, but hopefully, and in the future I'm hoping to schedule slots at times that would be more convenient in further time zones. I mean, for example, there was a fan in Japan who stayed up till, 2 a.m. to do her interview because that fit with her schedule based on when I was doing them in Milwaukee.
Wow.
Excellent.
Well, we've both done it, and
Yes,
it was a lot of fun. And
glad to hear it.
Really just a pleasure to be a part of something that important. So thank you for that. And we will have links on our website for folks listening to this in the future, where you can find Bill's site and set up an appointment.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Our next guest is the very first person we had on the show. Well, one of two people that we had on our very first interview, back when she and Andrew Higgins joined us to talk about a secret vice.
Dr. Dimitra Fimi is a lecturer in fantasy and children's literature at the University of Glasgow. She's contributed to many journals and scholarly collections, and she also regularly appears on radio and TV programs. Her books include the Mythopoeic Scholarship Award-winning Tolkien, Race and Cultural History, and the previously mentioned critical edition of Tolkien's A Secret Vice, which also won a Tolkien Society Award.
We can't wait to hear what she's been up to since the last time we talked. So please, folks, help us welcome back Dimitra Fimi to the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me back. It's great to be here with you.
It's our pleasure.
Wonderful to have you back.
Well, we've asked this question of a couple of other guests previously, but we really want your take on it since you've written so much about Tolkien in context with his world. We're here in Birmingham for Tolkien 2019. Now, of course, we know Tolkien spent his childhood in Birmingham, but what specifically does this place tell us about Tolkien's work? How did Birmingham impact his writing?
Birmingham was a place he came back to, really. He wasn't born here, as you all know. But it was this return to a countryside, an idealized, I suppose, countryside at the time that became home, and there was this sense of returning somewhere he really belonged to. So I don't know how many of you have been to Sarehall Mill and Moseley Bog and the areas around where Tolkien grew up. But these are absolutely instrumental to how he was thinking later on, for example, about the Shire, and also how he pictured and how he drew the Shire.
Mm-hmm. Earlier this year, we released an episode on race in Tolkien's work, and your book, Tolkien, Race and Cultural History, was a priceless resource, so thank you for that. Absolutely. We wanted to say that publicly. But I know you've also recently written about this topic again, late last year, and I feel like with the Amazon series coming soon, we're already seeing more conversation in the public sphere about Tolkien, and with it comes some of these questions about race and representation in general. Why does this continue to be an issue where Tolkien is concerned compared with other authors of his time?
I don't think it's only a Tolkien issue. I think we are going back and looking at a number of other authors at the time as well. It's just that Tolkien is particularly popular. The Lord of the Rings is a particularly beloved text, even for people who might not read any other fantasy at all, but Tolkien is at the center of their reading experience. So I think there is a bigger movement to sort of go back and discuss these things. That doesn't necessarily mean that we don't read the text anymore, or we don't, we think it should be banned, or, there are very, very weird views out there. We've always known things that were wrong with the ideological sort of background for a number of canonical authors, including like Shakespeare, including, the lot. But we can't at the same time... we can't shy away from the fact that there's a younger generation of readers who encounter the text and who have a very different experience of how these things are discussed today. And, there are moments which feel jarring for readers, and we need to be talking about these things.
Yeah, and it's an important conversation, and it's not an easy conversation.
No, it's not an easy conversation, and for me it's always been a balancing between understanding where the work sits in its historical, cultural, sort of intellectual context, but at the same time understanding that readers today are reading it and getting something out of it for their present time. So it's getting that balance right and having an understanding of these two things that are pulling a text, two sides.
It's definitely an interesting time to be a Tolkien fan and to be a part of some of these discussions.
Yeah, there's been also a long discussion about representation of women. There's also a lot more emphasis today about representation of gender diversity more generally, and all of these things will keep on coming back and being discussed. As long as we use the text as a springboard to talk about these things, I don't see a problem with it. If anything, that's where the discussion should be going.
Well, here's a much easier question. What's been the highlight of Tolkien 2019 for you so far?
I'm going to be very boring and say it's more or less the same as Brian said earlier on. It's just seeing people. I missed Oxenwood last year because I had an operation. I couldn't talk. I had my tonsils out.
Oh.
It was very painful.
Yes.
So I usually see, there's a set of people I know I'm going to see in September every year, and it's this feeling of fellowship and sitting down together and catching up and talking about the latest Tolkien book that's just come out and sort of sharing experiences. So I missed that last year, and it was absolutely brilliant to catch up with friends. But also, I have a number of PhD students who are based abroad, 2 of them in the States, 1 in New Zealand, and this is a point where, instead of supervising them via Skype or Zoom or whatever, which is our regular sort of meetings, we can sit down and have a cup of coffee, sitting next to each other, which is really, really lovely.
That would be.
Yeah.
That's great. We've only got about a day left in the conference. Is there anything you're still looking forward to besides your talk, which is going to close out the conference?
Yeah. Well, I've got a bit of it's a bit of a difficult one, this, because I'm closing the conference, and that's tough because I need to get it right. I can't, leave people with a bad taste, at the end. And there will be singing, so be kind to me. Be kind to me. I think there's still talks to come that I want to go to, definitely. There's still dinners to be had with people I haven't had a chance to speak a bit more with. I still haven't seen the art show. I need to get myself out there right now, because I understand, this is more or less the last chance really to see it. And spend more time with people before we all have to, disperse and go our separate ways.
Yeah, which is going to be very sad, I feel.
I know. It's going to be a hard day tomorrow.
Well, one more quick question for you, hopefully, before you go and see that art show. What are you working on now? What's next for Dr. Dimitra Fimi?
There's a number of things that are brewing at the moment, shall we say, and they're all at different stages of development. You know that I work on children's fantasy more generally and fantasy more generally. So my last book, actually, after Secret Vice, was on Celtic myth and contemporary children's fantasy. There is a collection of texts, a collection of essays on Celtic-inspired fantasy, wider than just children's and more contemporary, that's coming up, so I'm co-editing that. There is the Tolkien project in modern Greek, which collects scholarship on Tolkien and his Greek sources and his Greek influences, which will be published by a Greek publisher in my native language, which is the first time that's ever going to happen. And I feel very ambassadorial and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. There is an article in the works on Tolkien and Kipling that I've been mulling around for far too long. Some of you have heard a version of that. And there are other bits and pieces that are not that necessarily not that Tolkien related. There's something on invented languages, but that's far too big a project, and I'm still not sure where exactly it's going. So we'll see.
Well, I'm already excited for that one.
Well, it sounds like there's going to be plenty of opportunities and reasons for us to have you back on the show again.
And we'd love to do so. Thank you, Dimitra.
Thank you for having me.
Well, folks, that's going to wrap it up for our appearance today. We want to thank you all for coming. Thanks again to our guests.
And if you missed our first session on Thursday, don't worry. You will be able to hear it and this when we release this podcast as episode 136 of the Prancing Pony Podcast on September 15th.
And most importantly, if this is the first time you've heard of us and you've liked what you've heard, please come check out the Prancing Pony Podcast. You can find us everywhere you find podcasts. You can subscribe to us through iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app.
Yeah, and we've also always got lots of discussion happening all the time in our social media spaces. We call it our common room on Facebook. That's where we have a lot of our comments, questions, and corrections. And yes, there are corrections, lots of them.
Lots and lots of them.
To every episode. We also post updates on Facebook throughout the week. Just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook. Click the like and follow buttons.
Please. And you can also find us on Twitter, @PrancingPonyPod, and on Instagram, @PrancingPonyPod. So follow us wherever you happen to be. And if you like us, please share us on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, anywhere else you can find Tolkien fans.
And if you really want to let the world know your feelings about us, give us a review on iTunes, please. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is, and that helps others find us and find this great community of Tolkien fans that we've built together.
Finally, if you would like access to exclusive content like postscripts, quarterly specials, PPP swag beyond what we see here on the table, which you're welcome to, please check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the fellowship of the podcast.
And if you'd like to get your hands on a book we've mentioned in our podcast, There's an official library page on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. There we post links to every book we mention on the show, including the ones that have been brought up today.
That's right. And there's a lot of other stuff on our website as well. Show notes, book links specific to each episode, outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and a few other little extras.
And for those of you who are listening at home in the future, we want to thank all of you once again. And a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier, DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, and Paul in Colorado. That list is getting long.
It is.
Thank you all.
One last thing as always, folks, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and most of all, your Tolkien 2019 stories to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Barliman's not always punctual with the mail, but we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show.
Well, 45 minutes is definitely far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends. And that is not the end of
That's right.
this.
We are now going to open this up for questions since we have a little bit of time left. So,
hello.
Hello.
Hi there. Right, we've all been listening to some wonderful talks over the last few days,
Yes, we
and
have.
it occurred to me that I know you guys have written some sort of thoughts and essays on the website, but if you were actually presenting a talk here at a conference like this, a question for each of you, what would you choose? What would your talk be about?
Oh my goodness.
I think if we had to do one today, we would have probably done what we talked about at TechSmith. We attended, we were the keynote speakers at TechSmith, which is one of the regional one-day moots put on by Signum University. And I think we did one there recently on how podcasting has become the digital mead hall of the 21st century. It is the place where people can gather and hear a story told in a different way, in different ways over a period of time, and gather together and build community around the story. That's the short version of it.
Yeah.
But I think that might have been something we talk about.
Yeah, I think so, man. That's something that we've, I think, learned a bit about just from experiencing it, and that has been the most interesting thing.
Because heaven knows we don't have the academic credentials. We just have our experience.
Right. And so I think that, that's what we've seen is just how much community builds up around that. So
Absolutely.
Always something we love talking about.
Hey, guys.
Hi, how you doing?
Great to meet you again.
Thank you.
I just wanted something that's always been sort of on my mind ever since I started listening to you. How would you say Tolkien himself and his writings influenced the way you construct your podcasts? And
oh, goodness. Shawn?
Thank you. I would say looking at it as this seems like kind of a silly word to use in reference to Tolkien, but thinking of it as a multimedia platform, thinking of it as not just an audio podcast, but also a community of listeners, a website where we have posted essays and where we share books that we're interested in. I think that feels to me, I don't know, I feel like maybe we kind of picked up that idea for that approach from Tolkien himself, because it is not just a story, it's languages, it's appendices and histories and all that stuff. And so while I don't think we have done what he's done by any stretch, I think that's sort of I think that sort of influenced us.
I would also say possibly On Fairy Stories influenced me a little bit in how we structure things with the whole idea of escape, recovery, and consolation. We want to provide those things to our listeners to some extent. That's why we don't bring in a lot of current events and things like that and try to make that, because we want people to be able to escape from that for a little while. So we want to be able to provide that and obviously provide the eucatastrophe, the happy ending of our stories.
Good answer.
Well, thank you, Shawn.
Thank you, guys. I just want to say that you got me through, well, I love the Silmarillion, but listening to you guys while reading it was like having friends and being able to talk about it. So going back to, I don't know if everyone knows how much they feel about Feanor. and how passionate and opinionated all Tolkien fans are. I'm just wondering if, maybe not Feanor related, have you had any really good debates or any discussions of people? Because, we've seen disagreements.
We've had a few Feanor defenders who've sent us emails.
Now, are you talking between ourselves or We've had the Feanor conversation with a few people.
More than once. Yeah.
More than once. We've had.
We're still right.
We've had I've had conversations with people about the nature of evil in Tolkien's world, whether it is truly quite, for folks who've heard our earlier episodes, and I think we got into this a lot in season 1 with like Turin Turambar and things like that. Yeah. We talked a lot about the nature of evil, and we talked a bit about Boethius and things like that that influenced Tolkien. And I've had people challenge me and say, Tolkien's not quite as Boethian as you think.
Yeah, more Manichaean
or there's a mix of things, and I think Tom Shippey has written some stuff to that effect too. So that's been one. I'm trying to think of some other things that people.
There've been a few here and there, and we do, of course, listen very seriously to the opinions of others. We may joke about it, but of course we listen, quite seriously. As for each other, we've gotten some grief on the fact that we don't disagree enough. But the fact of the matter is, I'm very convincing. And no, I'm kidding. We just end up landing on the same spot 95% of the time.
Well, and I shared this story in the previous
the Tom Bombadil
previous session, the Tom Bombadil thing. We spent about 45 minutes to an hour discussing Tom Bombadil several weeks ago. Yeah. And we decided we were going to come up with what we think Tom Bombadil is. We're going to look independently. We're going to look at all the literature that's out there. We're going to look at everything and come up with our own conclusions and prepared for a big argument on the show. And we spent all this time going back and forth. And at the end of it, there was this moment of, did we just say the same thing?
And we both started from different positions.
Yeah.
You started from one, I started from another, but we both landed on this other thing altogether.
Yeah.
So what's been your highlight of Tolkien 2019?
Oh, goodness. Honestly, if I'm talking events, far and away, Tree and Leaf. Leaf by Niggle, Tree and Leaf. Leaf by Niggle.
It was part of Tree and Leaf.
It is part of Tree and Leaf, that's true. But realistically, outside of all the events, it's just been meeting all you people. It's been a phenomenal experience to get to connect with our listeners, but also to connect with people who've never heard of our show and who are just other Tolkien fans. I got to taste a little bit of that last year at Oxenmoot, but this year has been that on a bigger scale.
I would say Leaf by Niggle was a huge highlight. There have been too many incredible talks here for me to list them all out. But yeah, I think the highlight for me has really just been being here and meeting people that I've never met before, also meeting people that I've talked to on Facebook a lot, but have never actually met in person, and just the feeling of fellowship that we have in this community, and how welcoming everyone is. That's been the highlight for me. So it's I think I said this earlier when Brian was up here. It's a bit like coming home.
It really is. These are our people.
Yeah.
This is our tribe. Yeah. Absolutely. We actually still have a few more minutes, so if there are some more questions.
So you produce a 90-minute podcast each week, and you monitor social media. On average, how many hours of a week do you spend devoted to Prancing Pony?
It's probably, we're at about 8 to 12 hours per episode per person. We shift our workload between us. That's a longer answer than is available, but 8 to 12 hours per episode per each of us.
Yeah.
So it is a lot of effort, and we wouldn't be able to do that without the support of our Patreon family. When we first did that, we were still bi-weekly, and we also weren't quite putting as much work into it. We were probably at about 6 hours per episode, but it was 2 weeks between episodes, or 1 week between episodes. So we've more than doubled the work. We've trebled the work, and it's probably going to continue to be even more as we move into season 4 and continue to find ways to improve the show.
We always thought that as we got better at this, we would spend less. It would take less time because we'd know what we were doing.
No,
we still take the same amount of time or more. But I do think that the output is better.
I think so.
And you said it wouldn't be possible without the support of our Patreon family. It also would not be possible without the undying support of our actual families.
Our literal families.
Because we are both married with young children about the same age. All of them 7 or under. So.
7 and 5, 6 and 4, and they miss us terribly. And so for us to be gone is hard on them. And without their support, we couldn't do this either.
Yeah.
A spoiler for the next series. How many episodes of the Council of Elrond?
We're counting
5. We're going to do 5 episodes on the Council of Elrond. One of which, here's a spoiler.
We reserve the right to change that.
Oh, yeah, it could change. And here's another spoiler on that. One of those will be co-hosted with Corey Olsen. We're going to cross co-host. He's going to come with us on one, and then we're going to go on his show and co-host. So right at our crossover point, which we think will be in the Council of Elrond.
It will be
at his pace. It might be. I don't know where it'll be.
It will be an interesting experiment in time dilation.
Yes, it will. And then one more quick one here, Jeremy.
We'll have to. It'll have to be.
Sorry, I was a few moments late showing up because I was getting some critique from Wayne and Christina from my paper yesterday. I was wondering if you have any anecdotes you'd like to share of
people who
have said corrections or anything like that on your show.
We
have so many, I forget them all.
Yeah. My favorite one is the one that happened in the finale to last season, which was episode 135, in which we interviewed Wayne Hammond and Christina Skull, and we made a claim at the beginning of the show that Wayne corrected later in the show.
In the same show.
In the same show, which was the quickest turnaround we've ever had on a correction.
Yeah.
And that was refreshing. But they were also, they were just so great about reminding us that hey, anybody can make a mistake, and and we all do. So
the best part of that though is it was Shawn's mistake.
Yeah. Isn't it always though? Isn't it?
No. Well, I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, folks.
Thank
we
you
really
all so
appreciate
much.
you being here.